Hi, I'm Bobby LaJess with Land of 10 Iowa, here for the latest Land of 10 Iowa Facebook Live session. My first session back since taking a week off last week. So glad to be back with everybody. As always, throw your questions in there. We'll have this as much of a conversation as everything else. Whatever you want to talk about, we can. The Iowa basketball game that just wrapped up with the team beating Illinois to open up Big Ten tournament play with a victory. We can talk Iowa football recruiting, and the big junior day coming up on Sunday. So whatever everybody wants to discuss is kind of where we'll have this go. You guys kind of have the floor, and we can make it a conversation back and forth. But I guess I'll open up a little bit until the questions flow in about that Illinois game. Beating Illinois there. It was a really interesting game because for the first half, Iowa came out and played pretty good defense on Illinois, which is something you haven't seen them do too often. And they had a pretty decent lead, and you saw some turnovers pop up, which was a season-long issue. And then kind of in the second half, you saw them flip it around, which was the defense wasn't there, but they possessed the ball better and played better on offense. And it was two completely different kind of ways for Iowa to play a game, but it worked out for them because they led for most of the contest. So we got a couple questions coming here, so we'll start hitting those in. Chad wants to know if I'm in New York. I am not in New York. I am in my house just outside of Iowa City in Tiffin. So, no, we've got a couple reporters for Land of 10 there who will be doing some content from the Big Apple, but I was watching the game and running our live blog from my basement. Eric wants to know if Iowa wins the tournament, do they have a shot at the NIT? I don't know. They're still, 4 games under 500 at this point, making it to the finals will put them with an under 500 record, and an under 500 record, you're not getting into that tournament. So I think it's unlikely because if you win the Big Ten tournament, you're going to the NCAA tournament, so the NIT won't be on the docket. I really think their only hope at the postseason there is they have to win 5 games in 5 days, do what Connecticut did in 2011 in the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden on that same court to have a shot at the postseason, and it will end up being the NCAA tournament, not the NIT tournament. I think that's really where it sits. Doug wants to know how Wagner's doing. Yeah, it looked like he ended up with a leg injury, maybe a knee injury there. Late in the second half, they took him to the tunnel. They had him come back out on the bench. I don't have any more of an update beyond that. Not at the press conference, not able to ask Fran any of that. I think we'll see an update on that popping up from the reporters who are in New York on Twitter, if not by now, shortly or soon thereafter. Max wants to know if I think Iowa can win the Big Ten. If we're talking about the Big Ten basketball tournament that's going on, probably not, simply because 5 games in 5 days is a really hard thing to do. Only one team's done it that I've come across, and like I said, that was Connecticut from a few years ago, because the problem is the longer you get in the tournament, you're going to be playing teams that have rest that you don't. So tomorrow they play Michigan. That's a team that hasn't played. It'll be Iowa's second game in as many days. When you get to the next game, you'll be playing a team, I believe Nebraska is the one they would filter into, who would be playing their first tournament game. And if Iowa was somehow to beat Michigan, that'd be their third game in 3 days against a team that hasn't been on the court yet. So on top of you having to play all those games and having that fatigue pile up, the team you're playing is still coming in fresh. So it's kind of like a gauntlet match that makes it really hard for you. Carroll says Iowa can play in the CBI. They can, but the indication I've gotten, what I've heard, is I don't think that's going to be in play for this team, because that's a tournament essentially you kind of have to pay your way into and things like that. And it ends up being a losing proposition on the ledger line for a lot of teams. So you see a lot of teams that pass on that tournament simply for that reason. You have some teams that end up playing in that just because they want to say they've been into a postseason tournament, or they think it might be able to help their team to the point that it doesn't matter if they end up taking a loss on that. So, yeah, it's there, but I don't think it's going to be in play for Iowa. Tim wants to know any truth about the Tyler Cook and the Missouri rumors. There's been a lot of buzz on that on the boards. Yeah, at this point, that's what it is, a rumor. I've heard similar things, but nothing that I've been able to report at this point. I understand if you're an Iowa fan why that's going to give you pause. It's been a year that's gone, that's gone south in a lot of ways. Nothing how this team expected. If Iowa or if any team ends up losing somebody who's one of the kind of two cornerstones of their team in an offseason, when that person's a member of the core of the roster, especially when it's so many underclassmen, that's going to give you a lot of pause and I think have you worried. But like I said, there's nothing I've been able to report on that from this front, and I've seen a lot of the same things everybody else has, and I've kind of talked around a little bit on that front. Chad says the D looks good. That is he says it's 2 games where the D has looked better. I would say the first half the D looked better. I don't think it necessarily looked great in the second half. Illinois got a lot of buckets. They did a lot of damage from the 3-point line. Yes, it was better than probably what you would have seen in the first half of the game against Illinois in January, but I think that second half defensive effort they had today will not be enough to beat Michigan. What you saw in the first half would put you on the path there. You kind of got to combine the defense you saw in the first half for that, along with what you saw offensively in the second half with the ball security. If you can put those two together, you can get Bohannon to score how he did. You can have Luka play in the game he did. I thought Luka had a really great second half, did a great job on both ends of the floor, rebounding and with scoring. And they had a rebounding edge. Rebounding doesn't necessarily correlate to wins in college basketball, but the way Iowa dominated Illinois on the boards today, I thought was a good sign for them, because Illinois is a team that can do good things on the boards. They attack the offensive glass. Part of the reason Illinois built a 20-point lead in the first game against Iowa was because of the work they did on the offensive glass. So there's a lot of good things to take away from that game. The Northwestern game was another good game, like Chad kind of said, for Iowa. So, yeah, there's some good things going on for them. We'll have to see what happens with Michigan. You're going to have to upset a team that I believe is ranked number 15 in the country right now if they're going to live to see a third day of the tournament. Carol says her son has officiated a game in Muscatine and said the Iowa recruit is awesome. Yes, Wieskamp. He's everything. Kid looks like a star player. At the high school level, looks like somebody who could develop into that at the college level. His team just qualified for state, I believe it was yesterday. Looks like a kid who will be able to come in and have a role right away from day one. Iowa needs somebody who can come in and play on the perimeter with Jordan Bohannon. That's been one of their biggest deficiencies, is somebody who can do a lot of things on that front, defend especially, but also score. He'll be able to do that right away. The question will be, will he be able to start right away? Will he come off the bench? Will he provide some instant offense? We'll see on that front, but yeah, he's definitely a talent. Kim says, Bohannon was guarded very physically and no fouls. Is that the new norm? That's Illinois' defense. Illinois is very aggressive. They're very physical. They pick you up the entire length of the floor, and they try to deny the pass, and in a lot of cases, the second pass you'd be making too. That happened a lot in the first game. They do that because it can create success for them. Jordan had a lot of turnovers early. I think he ended up with 5 turnovers for the game, and he ended up with 4 in the first 8 or 10 minutes or so. That's what they do, and they want to wear you down with that, and they want to get turnovers. And when a team is consistently physical with you, the refs aren't going to maybe call every tic-tac foul that you might see elsewhere, because it happens so often. They have to pick or choose their battles. It's part of the reason why you see in football games physical teams that have physical defensive backs and cornerbacks. Teams complain that that guy might have had pass interference call because the other guy was overly physical. But if he's overly physical every play, the refs aren't going to call it every play. And so it's kind of that same thing with the Illinois defense. And I wouldn't call it the new normal. That was just kind of what happened there. But you have seen teams before, and not just Illinois, kind of attack Bohannon at the point of attack, get physical in his face. That's been something teams have consistently used, because it either gets the ball out of his hand or it's resulted in turnovers in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's also something you see coming out of Michigan a little bit tomorrow, just because of that. Brad already talked about Cook. You might want to backtrack maybe to the 5-minute mark, 6-minute mark on this one to where we brought that up. Reggie says, does Wieskamp compare to any previous college players? I haven't seen enough of him in person to get a good comp with him. And just from past experience, that's kind of what it's been. Tape can only kind of do so much, but he's a kid who can score. He's one of the most prolific scorers in Iowa basketball history. He's a perimeter player, can shoot well from three, has a great shot, is kind of everything Fran looks for in a recruit, because everything he really wants is a scorer, and he builds up from there, and that's exactly what he is. So it'll be interesting to see what he does when he gets here. Gloria says she loves Iowa, the university. Thanks everybody, and everybody that believed. Well, you're going to have to believe a whole heck of a lot, Gloria, for this team, not just to get one win, but to keep going, because they will be underdogs against Michigan, top 25 team. If they survive that, they get Nebraska, a team that's playing for its tournament life. They need to win probably a game or two in the Big Ten tournament to go on. And then if, Iowa's to keep rolling and somehow make the semifinals, odds are you're facing Michigan State there. And, yeah, Iowa played them well at home, but, that's one of the best teams in the country, and so that's a tough one. So, yeah, it was a good game today. I think it was a positive step that you wanted to see for this team, that you can at least enter the game tomorrow with Michigan thinking if they bring a lot of those elements that you saw today, they'll have more than a puncher's chance in that game. I really like this Michigan team. They're a team that plays efficiently on both ends of the floor. They seem to be playing better as the year's gone on. Mo Wagner is a beast for them. I'm not saying this just to kind of, get every Iowa fan thinking out there this is going to be a loss. But that's a really good team, and they're going to have to bring their A game. And stretches like you saw from Iowa throughout the season where they have turnovers and all of a sudden the opponent gets a 10-2 run, or the defense disappears for a little while that lets the opponent score for a little bit. Just one stretch like that might be enough for Michigan to knock Iowa out of that game. So they're going to have to play a full 40-minute effort, which we've seen time and again has not been Iowa's strong suit this year, though they have played better and a little bit more consistently in these last couple of games, going back to Sunday with Northwestern and again today. Jared chimes in that he thinks Cook isn't going to transfer or to sit out here. He thinks if he leaves, it'll be the NBA. The problem there is I haven't seen a mock draft that has Tyler Cook anywhere near the first round. And most players aren't going to go pro out of college unless they see themselves with a name there somewhere. Now, a lot of guys do it without a great chance of being selected in the first round, which is a whole issue inside of itself. But for Tyler right now, he's not a name that's being thrown about in NBA draft circles right now. So him leaving for that isn't probably the best case scenario for anybody involved. Sue says the Iowa managers are great too. And Seth chimes in, are they doing the 20-game conference schedule for sure then? That's a great question. And I'm blanking on the answer on that off the top of my head, but I believe it's coming up down the road. I just don't know if next year is the year for that or not. So we ran through all the questions here. So if you have any more, fire them up quick before we turn off before I finish up this Facebook Live session. But thanks everybody for participating. If there's nothing else, we will wrap it up here. Iowa opened up Big Ten basketball tourney play with the win over Illinois. They will face Michigan tomorrow. Tip-off for that game will be 25 minutes or so after the Maryland-Wisconsin game, which I believe starts at 11. So imagine a 1:30 or so. Tip-off for that last question from Troy, who says, any transfers? When it comes to basketball, I imagine there will be. Virtually every year there's several, and I wouldn't be surprised with this team if there are, because they've got a lot of guys who are caliber players of Division I basketball, and you only have so many minutes, so many guys who can play. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Jared wants to know if you should drink Bacardi and Coke tonight. Go for it as long as you don't drive with it. And Jim says Garza's going to be a beast. But, yeah, to finish with Troy, there'll be a few. It's hard to predict maybe who, but it's always a safe bet to expect a few transfers at the end of a college basketball season for most teams. So thanks, everybody, for coming in, joining in, and asking all these questions. Appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next Facebook Live session, everybody. Bye.